Patiently waiting. That's what Brett Yormark and the Big 12 are doing as conference realignment talks heat up as Florida State looks to exit the ACC. Which teams and schools could potentially join the Big 12 if the ACC were to collapse? In today's video, we'll talk about that and which schools make the most sense, dream scenarios, and much more. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and notification bell to stay in the know on everything conference realignment regarding the Big 12 all year long. Listen, football season's over when it comes to at least the regular season, so that can only mean one thing when it comes to college football. Conference realignment, at least in modern college football, that is. So if you want to stay in the know from a Big 12 perspective all year long on conference realignment, simply like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. But before we get into, really what's going on with Florida State right now and their board of trustees and how this could impact the ACC and really that conference's potential collapse moving forward, I want to hear from you guys in this sense. Which ACC schools would you want the Big 12 to add most? Now, this isn't the most realistic question. This is, what schools do you want them to add most? Is it Miami? Is it Florida State? Is it North Carolina, Duke? Let me know down in the comments below which ACC schools you would want the Big 12 to add most if the conference was to collapse. All right, let's lay the land a little bit when it comes to the ACC and Florida State right now, as this is going to be the biggest talking point in college football this offseason. And I really don't think it's going to be much of a debate unless something comes from out of left field that takes eyeballs away from this. But I just don't think that'll happen when you consider that what Florida State is trying to do is be the first team over the hurdle of the ACC in terms of finding a loophole in their grant of rights to leave and not have to pay the exit fee. And we'll talk about that here in just a second in terms of just the historic type exit fee they would have to pay if they were to leave the ACC as it currently stands right now. But if Florida State is able to do this, you're going to see the Clemsons of the world, the Miamis of the world, the UNCs of the world, that domino effect in the ACC take place to the point where the ACC is no more. That's what's going to happen. So this is from CBS Sports. They lay it out really, really well in the sense of what went down on Friday, December 22nd for the Board of Trustees at Florida State and really their process of trying to exit the ACC. They say Florida State's Board of Trustees voted unanimously, on Friday, December 22nd to file a lawsuit against the ACC challenging the league's grant of rights and withdrawal penalties, taking a critical first step towards a potential exit. The 7-count suit filed formally in Tallahassee Circuit Court alleges the ACC breached the contract for failing to create appropriate media rights value and violated the state of Florida's antitrust laws. Moreover, it claims the withdrawal penalty of a mind-boggling $572 million. Over half a bill. Over half a bill. $130 million of which comes from TV revenue is unenforceable. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, the number just catches your eye, right? I mean, that is insane amount of money when it comes down to it. But I kind of wanted to look at the map of the current landscape of the ACC and really get into this from a potential Big 12 perspective. Okay, let's look west here. Okay, so everything west of the Mississippi. SMU, let's start with that one. Does it make sense for the Big 12 to add SMU? Well, if the Big 12 wanted to add SMU, I think it would have already been done, right? You have the DFW area with TCU. I'm not sure why you would bring SMU in unless they do something very similar, if not for a longer period of time, of what they're currently doing in the ACC, where they get no money for basically a decade. Maybe. Now, Cal and Stanford, as you go all the way west, I just don't see it. There's too many differences in terms of the way that those institutions think, aligned with how the Big 12 teams think. And that's not a bad thing. Everybody can think their own way about college athletics. I just don't see it because, again, if they were to join the Big 12, I think it would have happened already. And that first wave of realignment for the Big 12 when they went out west and added the likes of the four corner schools, right? In Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. It doesn't make much sense to me. So everything I'm going to be looking at in today's video in terms of the schools that I think the Big 12 could potentially, both in a dream scenario and realistic scenario, add, all come east. which I don't think is that surprising. Now, I do want to preface this. There are some of these that are in the dream scenario category, and there's some of these that are in the, well, I think this could actually happen category, if we're being honest about it. So let's start with one of the dream scenario schools, and that's Florida State, the team in the news right now. Is this likely? No, it is not likely whatsoever that the Big 12 adds Florida State. That being said, we have seen Brett Yormark pull things out of a hat in terms of going out and getting schools that the Big 12 didn't really look like they were in a position to obtain and add to the conference, and he did it anyway. I wonder if you have Brett Yormark go down there and really just, have a couple phone calls. Maybe he goes to Florida to UCF and then makes a trip to Tallahassee. I'm just spitballing here on that regard. But maybe he tries to accelerate the process in the sense of, okay, we're a firm landing spot for you, Florida State. We can take that worry of where are we going to go in the future off the table. Now, the biggest part of this is money. The Big 12 schools technically make more money than the ACC, but not by much. Florida State feels like they're going to end up in the Big 10 or SEC, more likely the SEC. But maybe, just like the Big 12 did in terms of the media rights out west with the Pac-12 and ruined that conference, Brett Yormark just swoops in, gets ahead of the curve, and potentially lands the Seminoles, albeit very unlikely. Another school that is a no-brainer, but I think probably more on the unrealistic side, is Miami. I think Miami would get an SEC or Big Ten invite just from the standpoint of, okay, you're in Florida and you are one of the most recognizable brands in college athletics. Everybody knows the U, right? Everybody does. And so it's a no-brainer from the standpoint of the Big 12 trying to go out and obtain this school and add it to the conference. It's going to be much more difficult. Just like Florida State, I think this would be beneficial for the Big 12 in a multitude of areas. One of the biggest being outside of just brand recognition, right? You get another team in the state of Florida. Having that talent-rich state and having multiple schools in it would be big for the Big 12 moving forward. And I think it's something that Brett Yormark wants. Now, is it achievable? That's a completely different story. I don't know, and neither do you, but I do think it's something that Brett Yormark will heavily kick the tires on to gauge interest if this first domino of Florida State does fall and the ACC is left scrambling and maybe some of these schools figure out a way to exit if Florida State does first. All right, two schools that I think are probably the most realistic in all of this are Louisville and Pitt. The reason being is this: it just makes a ton of sense from the standpoint of, first and foremost, rivalries. Pitt and West Virginia, that's one of the biggest rivalries in all of college sports, specifically in that part of the country. You get that every year. I think that would be good for the brand of the Big 12. Speaking of another rivalry, you got Louisville and Cincinnati. I don't really know the dynamics of that. I don't know how Louisville fans view the rivalry with Cincinnati. Cincinnati fans view it with Louisville. I'm assuming it's pretty heavy because when you got a trophy named the Keg of Nails, you probably don't like the other school that much. And I'm all for college rivalries. So to add another one and have a linchpin in the rivalry game like that in the Big 12 year after year, I think would be good for the sport. It also allows you to really embed yourself in that part of the country and have a staple there if you are the Big 12. And I think it would help teams like the Iowa States of the world. It would help teams like Cincinnati, obviously, and West Virginia to have 5 schools up there if you were to go the route of really divisions later on in the future. Another school that really feels like the odds are it's not going to happen, but I want to bring them up anyway, the Clemson Tigers. I mean, you got to bring it up. It's a college town, right? And the Big 12 is known for those truck stop towns, like it or not. But I think that Clemson more than likely would get an invite from the SEC or Big Ten. And I'm trying to give you the realistic options here and also dream scenarios. Clemson more fits into the dream scenario, but it's 100% worth it if you're Brett Yormark to go and try and get the Tigers added to the Big 12. I think it's going to be a high priority for the Big 12 to try and get at least 2 of those North Carolina schools, maybe even 3 if you can, if the ACC does inevitably collapse. And I say inevitably because I think Florida State is on that track, and they're not the only school that wants to make this happen. They were just the front runners in it. And now there's multiple schools in the background, and I think Clemson is one of them thinking, okay, if Florida State finds a way, we're going to do the exact same thing they did to clear that hurdle and go join another conference. So that's why I'm putting Clemson in here. A school that interests me, and I think it's probably in the realistic aspect, but I don't know if it would actually happen, is Syracuse. And the reason being is this. Remember what Brett Yormark has said and the teams that he has had interest in terms of adding them to the conference. Gonzaga as a basketball only on the West Coast, and then UConn in the Northeast. He has made it a relatively known fact at this point that he is interested in adding a potential Northeast school to the Big 12, whether that's because of West Virginia, just to get more eyeballs, whatever it may be. And Syracuse, with its history in men's college basketball, would be a really solid fit for the Big 12. Now, I don't know if it would happen, but I do think that there is some steam in terms of, okay, you got the basketball aspect of it. Does Syracuse improve on the gridiron? They've obviously got a ton of momentum right now, landing Kyle McCord, and then you get the coach from Georgia. Like, you got a lot of momentum there. Now, obviously, you got to make some things happen, and maybe we're a year or two away from actually seeing the ACC fall apart, or maybe it doesn't at all. I think it probably does if Florida State figures this out. But Syracuse is a school that I would be interested in terms of the Big 12 side of things, albeit maybe a few notches down the pecking order, I should say. But it would be interesting. And now the final schools are the North Carolina schools. I mentioned that it would be great if you could add 3 of them. I think in a dream scenario, it's obviously USC, Duke, NC State. Okay, like, let's just be real about, or Clemson, excuse me, instead of NC State. The realistic aspect of it is probably the NC States of the world. And then you maybe, go down and that's the only Carolina school you add, and then you get Georgia Tech, right, to get that Atlanta market. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I feel like you are going to try your darndest if you're Brett Yormark to try and add the North Carolinas and Dukes and NC States and Clemsons because, again, the basketball prowess, it has been made known by Brett Yormark. He is putting an emphasis on college basketball. He knows that college football is the moneymaker. He's got a priority on that as well, but he's not trying to shortchange the impact that college basketball has on the Big 12 conference. And if you could potentially add 2 more blue bloods to the mix in North Carolina, and Duke, I mean, that would do wonders. Albeit, I think that's unlikely. I think if you are going to add Carolinas and Georgia schools, it would be the Georgia Techs of the world and then the NC States if you are the Big 12. One more time before we head out of here. Which ACC schools would you like the Big 12 to add most if the ACC were to collapse? Let me know down on the pinned comment below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to stay in the know on everything Big 12 conference realignment and what Brett Yormark is patiently waiting for, it seems like, in terms of the ACC and what's going down out east. I am RC Maxfield reminding you one more time, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to join the most engaging Texas Tech community here on YouTube in the Back to 12 podcast channel.